All right, welcome back to session 6 of Brainstorm, how to have a sound mind. I've heard that repetition is important, Doug, because they say that repetition is very helpful, and so it's good to repeat yourself and repeat yourself and repeat yourself.
And do it again.
You see what I did there?
Yeah, I did.
And so, for the 6th time, 2 Timothy 1:7.
Should we all read it together?
You guys ready?
Let's go.
All right, here we go. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Let's go. So for the 5th session, we talked about people pleasing, and our storm stopper was this: God is pleased with me. And so in the 5th session, we did a lot of the inner work. Now it's time to turn our focus to some of the outer work, right? What do we do when we face criticism, when people critique us, when people come after us? We usually love to give really creative titles to our sessions that make you go like, oh, I wonder what that one's about. This time we took the opposite approach, and it was pretty on the nose. Not everyone is going to like you. It's time to talk about criticism.
Yeah.
Doug, criticism is a part of life. Please help us.
Thanks, Ryan. Great intro. Well, first of all, it should be noted, when it comes to even a topic like this, you don't want our thoughts as much as I think we want the professionals' thoughts, the master's thoughts on this topic. And we talked about Jesus in the last session. I'm talking about the Apostle Paul right now. The guy was no stranger to criticism. I remember being in college, and I volunteered to coach a Little League team, and it was awesome. I loved it, and it was for, maybe they were like, 7, 8, 9 years old, and I show up to the very first practice, and I get all the kids lined up in rows to do, the arm circles and all the, sports position and all that kind of stuff, and then the last car to show up, they park in the parking lot, and the kid and the dad get out, and they're both jogging down to the field. And he's the smallest of all the kids, but the dad, I'm like, I know this guy. And he jogs up to me, and he's got his athletic gear on, of course, and he reaches out, just giant hands and this booming voice, and he says, hey man, I'm John Lynch. John Lynch, former safety for the Denver Broncos, GM right now for the San Francisco 49ers, one of the most hard-hitting safeties in the NFL. And he introduced, and I'm like, I know. But I'll never forget, because we get all the kids huddled up, and John Lynch just gets like down in the circle, and he looks at me and calls me coach. And I'm like, that's so cool. John Lynch just called me coach. But he looks at me and says, what's the plan, coach? What are we doing? And I thought that was so cool. But then there was another part of me that was like, what do you think we should do, John Lynch? Like, you're the professional athlete. I'm here because I'm trying to do community service for med school. We don't need to know my opinion on sports. We need to know your opinion on sports. What should we do, John Lynch? And in the same way, when it comes to a topic like this, what should we do, Paul? Because you've been there, and you've experienced about every possible amount of criticism there is. So the pro, what should we do, Apostle Paul? And there's a story towards the end of his life, the very end of the book of Acts, where Paul gets caught in like his 3rd shipwreck, which I'm like, just stop getting on boats, First of all, that's beside the point. But he's on a ship he doesn't even want to be on, and there's a storm, and he washes up onto this random island called Malta. I picture him like with seaweed on his ear, and he's like clinging to some driftwood and holding a Wilson volleyball. And anyways, just put it up there so we can get serious for a second. Acts 28, 1-6. Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us all because it was raining and cold. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. Now, at this point, I'm thinking, of course it did. You're on an island you didn't want to be on because you were forced to get on this boat you didn't want to get on. And, of course, the weather's bad. And you're just trying to be a good guy and collect some sticks to make a fire, and a viper jumps out, driven by the heat, and it doesn't just like bite him, it bites down on him. It fastened itself on his hand. And I think that's such a picture sometimes of the negative side of criticism in a lot of ways. Feels like I just got bit, you know? That's why Taylor Swift has her song Shake It Off. You know, and the whole theme is like snakes for that whole album. And she's like, that venom, like, I don't need that. Because that's exactly what Paul's about to do. When the Islanders, first of all, I'm like, did Taylor Swift read Acts 28? Because first of all, when the Islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, pay attention, they said to each other, this man must be a murderer. For though he escaped from the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live. But Paul, here it is, shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead, but after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds, and now they said he's a god. So this is in the span of about a minute, where they go from he's demonic to he's divine.
Get the pendulum back out, Doug.
Yeah. And what is the court of public opinion in one word? Fickle. He's demonic because a viper bit him. Oh, but then he shook it off and suffered no ill effects. Now he must be a god. And if you live by the praise of people, you will die by their criticism. Paul chose to do neither. Okay? Sometimes we think, hey, live by their praise, just don't die by their criticism. What Paul is teaching us, if you live by their praise, you will die by their criticism.
And to remind you that criticism is coming. At some point, there's always going to be a critic. Why? Because, to circle back to our title, not everyone's going to like you. This is just true. Hey, think about being the president of the United States. Arguably like one of the most prestigious positions you could ever get to. How do you get to that role? By getting like 50.1% of the electoral vote. That means 49.9% of the country didn't vote for you and doesn't like you. That's millions of people going, yeah, no, I don't like that candidate. I wish it was the other one. It's impossible to live your life in such a way where you don't gather any critics along the way. I'll say it this way. That rhymed, by the way. We need to remember that.
I already forgot it, sorry.
Yeah.
To live in such a way where you
have no critics along the way?
Wow.
What is it? We'll get there.
Really stuck.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a future sermon series. Really sticking with people. Okay, this one, Will. How about this? Not even God can please everyone. Have you noticed? Every Super Bowl, millions of people pray to God that one team will win the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, millions of other people are praying that the other team will win the Super Bowl. And so if you're God, what do? Because you can't please everyone. And so probably you sit back and laugh at humans for getting so attached to teams that you're not on. But the point is, if God can't please everybody, then like what chance do we have? And I'll take this a step further. You don't want to live life that way. Here's Jesus. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for that is how their ancestors treated the false prophets. The ones that were just saying all of the things that our itchy ears want to hear. So everyone was just speaking well of them, and the Bible goes, hey, that's actually not a good sign. Aristotle said it this way: to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. It's really the only way to avoid it is to not have purpose in life, to not be waking up in the morning going, hey, it's time for me to make this world a better place. It's time for me to put my best foot forward and do my best to make heaven more crowded. If you're going to live that way, there's going to be some critique along the way. It's so funny that we devote so much of our time to trying to make everybody happy when there's always going to be critics. Dave Ramsey, great quote. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And it's keying in on human nature, right? Like Ramsey's going, why are we doing this? Like why do we have such an innate need to impress these people that we don't like? Doug, do you have any idea?
Yes.
Help us.
Okay, the next slide should say the bleachers. Okay, me and Ryan talk about this all the time, where I will ask him often, and he'll ask me, hey, dude, who's on the bleachers in your brain right now? So all of us have bleachers in our minds, and on those bleachers is a crowd of critics that you have collected throughout the years. Maybe back from like elementary school, probably a lot from high school, maybe from college. Maybe it was a dad you're trying to prove something to, a mom you're trying to prove something to, somebody at a former church before you got to Red Rocks, a pastor from a former church, fill in the blank. We have bleachers in our minds, and to us, these people are all in the stands watching and observing our lives, and you work tirelessly trying to prove something to them, and they're not watching. It's bleachers in your brain. And I remember talking to one of our pastors and saying, man, I just feel like there's even some people in our lives who would secretly celebrate if this whole church plant failed. And he said, yeah, probably. And he said that's human nature, is when even for really, quote unquote, good people, when people around you fail at something, it validates something in us and makes us feel better about ourselves. We still are just under the impression like we're in AP Chem and it's graded on a curve, So who's on the bleachers in your brain? And can you get the vantage point enough to see that, there probably are a few people who would celebrate that, but a lot of them are actually like, if you were to run into them at like a grocery store in 10 years and you've been working for the last 20 years to prove something to them, they'd run into you and be like, dude, like, man, I hope you're well, man. And they like wish and want the best for you, and you still have them as the 18-year-old version of them in your brain. And then I also do believe the older you get, the more you realize that 85% of the people on the bleachers in your brain aren't paying attention and don't care anyways. You know what I mean? So that's the bleachers in your mind. It's not even real. However, it becomes real because everything begins with the 6 inches of space between your ears. It's how you perceive what is happening around you. And so that can be hell on earth. And it's not even something that's a reality thing that's happening. It's just happening because you have bleachers in your brain and people on the grandstands of your life who are waiting for you to mess up, and you're working and you're exhausted trying to prove something to people who are not watching.
It's so important, and that's why we ask each other that question all the time, because here's the solution to the bleachers. Have somebody you trust in your life who you can confess it to, because that's like shining a bright light on bleachers and realizing, like, there's so many times where I'll tell Doug who's on my bleachers, and for a few of the names, he'll be like, yeah, that's probably true. And then for a lot of them, he'll just laugh because he just knows, hey, they don't care. Like they're not watching, and I need to hear that, right? But it's something so powerful happens when you just have somebody that
let them go. Let them leave the stands.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love it. So
beat the traffic. Leave the stadium. Get out of my brain.
Traffic.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, we're you guys are watching us like come up with other sermon series in real time right now. Okay, we got to stay focused. So that is how we do some of the work for critics in the past. What about now critics in real time? Because criticism is real. What do you do when you're sitting in this auditorium and you start to get bored because you feel like these guys are just making inside jokes, and so you get your phone out and you start scrolling through your emails, and then you get an email from one of your coworkers who trashes your work performance, and all of a sudden you get critiqued, and you're dealing with a stone coming at you, a snake bite. What do you do in the moment when you get criticized? And so I want to give you a helpful tool that I've picked up along the way. And it's based off of this truth. Not all criticism is created equally. And so what I do is I've created 3 categories in my mind, and I put anytime critique comes, I first ask the question, okay, which category does this critique belong in? So the 3 categories are this: trolls, critics, friends. Trolls, critics, friends. First off, there are some people that just want to watch the world burn. They want to pull the rest of the world down into the misery that they're experiencing. Trolls is like the internet word for them. Hiding behind a computer screen has allowed people to say some like really mean things, some really awful things. And here's the what I will say about this category, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. You have a limited amount of energy to give to the world. Don't give it to people who don't want to get better. So when a critique falls into that first category, I've learned along the way, you shake it off, you don't think twice about it, and you just move on with your life. Now, second category, and this is a big one, is okay, what about if a critic comes to you with a critique? The difference between a critic and a troll is the critic actually cares. And a critic actually wants to get better. They'll probably come to you. Sometimes they'll be pretty heated. They'll usually have an agenda, and they will have something that they have a problem that they want to talk to you about. But if we're being real, it's because they're also passionate about the topic, or maybe you work together, or whatever it is. And so what I've learned to do when it falls into this category is 3 things. Three things. I got this. 3 things. The first is this: realize that there is probably some truth in there somewhere. It probably was not packaged correctly. It probably could have been said better. It probably stings a little bit. But there's also probably some truth at some level in there. And so to completely throw it away, like I do with the first category, is actually missing out on an opportunity to get better. Because there's some truth there. Number 2 is to learn to ask the question, what else is going on here? What's the question beneath the question that they're asking me? What's the pain beneath the pain that they're projecting towards me? Because if you do that, you actually create an opportunity to get pastoral with them and address their critique in a way that, one, makes you better, but also can heal them. This is like advanced player mode, right? When you can learn how to be present in the moment and go, hey, I wonder what else is going on in their life that's causing them to come after me in such a way. It's like the famous Brené Brown quote, every behavior has a backstory. And so I think I got that right. Is that how she said it? There's been so many renditions of it. But you're trying to figure out what else is going on in this space. And that leads me to the third thing I do in this category is if you are up for it, and there's lots of times where I'm not up for this, where I have to just leave and walk away, talk to Doug about it, whatever. But if you are up for it, you have an opportunity to be like Jesus and create space for somebody who is really hurting and absorb their pain and their frustration and listen and smile and give them space to actually heal. And so with the critic one, this is always the hardest one, but you're asking, okay, where is the truth in this, even if it's buried? What else is going on in their life? And how can I be like Jesus and hold some space for them? Does that make sense? Now the third one category is friends. And so there's going to be times where critique comes from trolls. There's going to be times where critique comes from critics. And then there's going to be times where it's a good friend or somebody that you love and somebody that you trust who has a critique. And these can be some of the most difficult moments, but they are absolute gifts when done in a grounded way from both sides. Now, it's not always the case. Like sometimes they can be a good friend, but they're not in a healthy place, and so it feels way more like an attack. But when it is coming at you in a healthy way, it's actually a brilliant opportunity for you to both get better together.
Yeah, that's good. It reminds me of, I think it's Hebrews 10 that talks about living in community and says, encourage each other and spur each other on. And so even that language about like, are you spurable by people who love you? And that language, I think I learned recently, like good spurs don't hurt healthy horses. It actually, champions them to be all they can be in a crazy cool way. And so can you, do you have spurable skin? The friends in your life who want the best for you, who want you to run your race with everything you got. Wow. We're that for each other. Yeah. Can you be can you spur? Can you be spurred? Your spurable skin will tell good stories. Wow. With even better friends about amazing things that they pushed you to do.
That's so good. I've been preaching sermons for maybe 12 years or so and gotten plenty of critique in all three of these categories. But one thing that I can tell you I've gotten is about maybe 8 or 9 times where Doug has pulled me aside and gone, hey, awesome first service. I see something here that could vastly improve what you are doing. And that kind of stuff happens. We workshop stuff together all the time. But there's been 8 or 9 moments over the years where he's gone, hey, I see something, and I'm just going to point it out because I love you, and I'm with you, and I want you to get better at this. Like, I remember one, so we started the church at this the spot called Gather, which was a shared workspace about a mile down the street. And it was this tiny little room, and there was really nowhere to escape, but we'd put some pipe and drape up, like stage right in that back, remember that space in the back corner? Mm-hmm. And it was like kind of like you could get back there and get away from everybody. And we were in between the 2 services, and Doug pulled me back there, and he goes, hey, awesome sermon. Here's one thing I've noticed. You probably remember this. He goes, when you're preaching today, you're standing still, but your leg is just jumping up and down like constantly.
Oh yeah, there was 5 others I was thinking of, but I do remember that.
I told you there was 9 total. I picked a pretty easy one. And he goes, nobody else notices. And then he said this, hey, I want you to be comfortable while you're doing this. I want you to be, he used this phrase, cozy in your own reality. I want you to be comfy up there. And so I'm just pointing it out. And I remember at the 6 o'clock when it started to happen, and I'm in the middle of a sermon, and I go, oh yeah, I am doing that thing. And all it took was being aware of it to go, yeah, I can just take a breath and just be comfortable. We're just up here talking about the gospel. It's fine, And so those moments, and there's so many of them, but it reminds me of the proverb, wounds from a friend can be trusted. Wounds from a friend, especially when they're in a healthy place, wounds from a friend can be trusted.
Okay, let's get a little practical right here. The ABCs of criticism. And so I've seen this modeled for me, and I'll tell you a story after I explain it to you, but I think this is so just practical and helpful. The ABCs of criticism. So think of, and think even in terms of almost the negative side of criticism. Like maybe it's undeserved, maybe, and there still might be some truth in there, but maybe much like that snake on Paul's hand, there's some venom in there, and it hurts, and it stings. What do? You do the ABCs. A, number one, you just simply acknowledge the bite. You don't have to pretend that didn't hurt, because those sort of critiques can sometimes sting. And you have to acknowledge it for what it is, so you could recognize it for what it is before it turns into something way bigger than what it is. So acknowledge the bite. You're not crazy. And then B, bless the person. And so in other words, first of all, is there some truth in here that I can take because I'm growing and I want to get better? Recognizing this person's probably in pain. This person's frustrated. Like Ryan said, there's a backstory behind this. But knowing full well, like the enemy wants this to speak death over me, and I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to speak life over this situation and over this person right now. I'm going to pray for this person who I feel like just latched out. And then C is carry on with your life. Don't carry spite, carry on. Because you get one life to live, and it's short. And it's too short for you to carry bitterness and spite with you over every critique that comes your way, over every offense and every critique that comes your way. And so acknowledge the bite, bless the person, carry on with your life. Imagine Paul sitting there, and he just leaves the snake on his hand. And I remember years ago giving a message about this, and had a stuffed snake on my hand, saying, snakes aren't accessories. You shake them off. You carry on with your life. That venom does not belong in your blood. Bitterness, you need to be protective over what gets into your spirit and what gets into your soul. And they didn't even mean it in that venomous way, but you're letting venom in the form of bitterness get into your substance, and it's changing you. And I saw the perfect example of this a few years ago. Our pastor, Sean, senior pastor of Olive Red Rocks, I was golfing with him, and he got a DM from a Christian that was just all venom. And first of all, never just check your phone while you're golfing. This always happens while you're golfing. But I remember, I read it, and I remember watching the ABCs of shaking the snake, or the ABCs of criticism, play out right before me, because he said, oh, like he acknowledged it. That stings. And then he closed his eyes, he took a deep breath, and he blessed the situation. He prayed for the person, not out loud, but just in his heart. And then he opened his eyes and he said, all right, hand me my 9-iron. And I was sitting there just like, that's it? Like, we're going to handle this.
I usually spiral for 3 weeks after that.
Give me your phone. I will DM this guy back. What's his handle? I'll take care of this. Go snap your 9-iron over your knee, and I will take care of this for you. And I remember what he said. It's a beautiful day. Let's golf. That critique, this doesn't own me. This doesn't get my day. I'll say this boldly. A comment section is like a cheap way for critics to feel power. That bitterness does not belong in my blood. That venom doesn't get in my system. It's a beautiful day. Let's golf. Don't carry spite. Carry on with your life. And here's what I'm learning. Turnaround time matters. In other words, how fast of a forgiver are you? We were just talking about this right backstage, doing a series one day called Fast Forgiveness. And it's fast food themed, but it's all about fast forgiveness.
It's like In-N-Out. It would look so cool.
Yeah. How fast are you at forgiving? In other words, so let's say that critique happens, or let's say somebody like that bite happens, and then it affects your emotions, and before you know it, it becomes a mood, And then before you know it, a few days go by, it's now your demeanor. And then at some point, someone's like, hey, what's wrong with so-and-so? And it's like, oh, last month this person said, you're like, last month? Seriously though, like last month. Carry on, man. Like shake it off. Got a life to like that turnaround time matters because the longer snakes aren't accessories. The longer you let that thing hang on your hand, like Paul, the more that venom gets in you, and then we got another problem on our hands. Way bigger than that criticism. In the form of bitterness that's like poison in the blood of your soul. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
so
like
turnaround time matters.
It's like the question you learn to ask is, am I a faster forgiver than I was a year ago?
Yeah.
Like think about that question for your own life. Are you getting faster at forgiving? Or are you in the opposite direction, learning to hold on to grudges more and more the older you get? It's like when you see somebody who is well advanced in years. There really seems to be like two different categories. The person who learned to forgive very fast, and they're just so full of life and peace, and they just realize that life's just not that important. And well, life is important, but all the things that people all the people say to you and all the critique just isn't all that important.
Yeah.
And then the other category of people that never learn that skill. And so they have decades of bitterness and grudges. Man, I want to be like the former. I want to learn how to forgive fast.
Hey, can I say one more thing?
Go.
Forgiveness is sort of like is generosity. And so there's a proverb that says the lives of the generous just seem to get larger, and the lives of the stingy just seem to get smaller. So if you imagine like here's my soul, and this person offends me, then I can draw like a slightly smaller circle, excluding them, you know? The problem is if you continue that pattern, before you know it, you're the only one left in your circle at the end of your life, very small on the inside. Jesus was the picture of the exact opposite. Crucify him. Praying for those who are crucifying him. Praying for the Roman soldier driving a 9-inch nail through his wrist. And he is drawing a bigger circle to include him. And in many ways, like that's the size of your soul. At the end of your life, I think it was Judah Smith who once said, are you going to be small on the inside or big on the inside? And it is kind of a cool connection equating forgiveness as a form of generosity. It's being relationally generous. I'm a fast forgiver. Turnaround time matters. Yep.
And so we want to flip this on you at the very end. You're probably expecting an exercise and a storm stopper about not caring about the criticism. We actually want to flip it and do this. The real question is, how do you handle praise? So to bring this full circle, Jesus is riding into town, and everyone is shouting, "Save us, save us, save us." And I pictured the disciples that night just being like so fired up, like, can you believe it? Oh, they love you, Jesus. Like, this is our time. You are their king, you know, like, isn't this so cool? And I pictured Jesus handling that praise, just kind of like, yeah, it's cool. That's fun. Okay. I pictured Jesus not getting addicted to the praise. And that becomes very important on Friday when the crowd is going, crucify him. And he can go, okay, yeah, it's fine. I don't get so caught up in the praise, and so I don't get so caught up in the criticism either. That's where the power is at, for as Doug just shared for us. You can be being nailed to a cross going, I actually care more about the soul of this poor Roman soldier who's driving this nail through my hands than I do about my own comfort. Father, forgive him. He doesn't know what he's doing. There's this great classic story, guy by the name of Dallas Willard, who is like the Yoda of spiritual formation. He had a night of ministry with a guy named John Ortberg, and Ortberg was kind of like his disciple. And they have this night of ministry, and then they're walking to their car, and Ortberg tells the story, and he says he's like overthinking everything, and he's like, they loved it. That was so good. That God moved in such a cool way. Dallas, wasn't that so great? Oh, but that one thing I said, I shouldn't have said it that way. It didn't come out quite right. Like that joke didn't land, and he's just ruminating on the whole night. And he said Dallas is just whistling as they walk to their car. And he stops and he goes, Dallas, how do you do like what we just did and then just be so at peace as you whistle, as you walk? And Dallas said this, oh, I just picture all that stuff like a helium balloon. He goes, I hold it, look at it, and then let it go. I love that picture. He goes, yeah, everything that just happened, it's a helium balloon. I hold it because it was really important. I look at it, so I evaluate what happened, and I just let it go. And go, hey, God did some pretty cool things. And also, I'm an imperfect person, and all of that stuff is true. But I just watch it as it just floats away. And so what Dallas is teaching him and teaching us is you got to be careful about how you handle the praise, too. Because if you can learn how to not get too invested in the praise, you'll be a whole lot better at also not getting too worked up in the critique. And this draws all the way back to where you're getting your validation. Dallas realizes, hey, I get my validation from my identity, from knowing that I'm a son. God says that's my son with whom I'm well pleased, whether the night went great or you bombed. It's true nonetheless. And so how do you deal with the critique? By also learning how to not get so invested into the praise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, praise is how you practice. You practice on praise. Yeah, so like when you receive those compliments and that encouragement, that's amazing. And then it's not a matter of like deflecting it, but redirecting it. So like receiving it, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you practice on praise because it's what you do with praise, that's the habit that you will also apply to critique. Okay, so the Storm Stopper, this is one of my favorite phrases. Preached a mini-series about this a few years ago on YouTube in honor of Friday Night Lights. Thick skin, soft hearts, can't lose. Thick skin, soft hearts,
Can't lose.
that was bad, guys. That was so bad. Thick skin, soft hearts.
Can't lose.
Okay, so the idea is at the end of your life, you have thicker skin and a softer heart. That is only going to happen on purpose. That is not the default setting, the default trajectory of the human being in this life. Because you can get to the end of your life and you have really thick skin and nobody can hurt you, but you also can't stand people anymore, and you have a really hard heart. At the flip side of that, you can have a really soft heart and so much empathy to give to people, but such thin skin that you get offended so fast. Your thick skin is the armor with which you get your soft heart to people, but you don't have it. And so thick skin and soft hearts is the goal. I remember preaching a message back in like 2014, and I had this very well-meaning seminary student who came up to me after and was furious and like yelled at me. And he said, and I quote, I am a seminary student in California visiting Colorado for 2 weeks to critique churches. I said, awesome. Not a calling, by the way, but
That doesn't count as a calling.
another serious idea. Not a calling.
Not a calling. That's
by
not a
the way.
calling. Critique is not a calling.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good.
But I have a softness in my heart for this guy now, because I called Ryan on the way home, and I was just like, I'm done preaching. It was like my third sermon. And I was like, I'm done, man. I can't. And you said, bro, because he was in seminary at the time, and he said, dude, I promise you, he has a very hard-hearted professor who is discipling him right now, and you need to pray for him. And you said, at the end of your life, thick skin and a soft heart, where you get tougher to offend the more critique you get. and you get a softer heart, more in love with people, because you see them as just that, people. Thick skin, soft hearts. All right, and then the exercise is this. Give your praise to God. So we just talked about it, but to circle back. I didn't come up with this. I think it was actually Corey ten Boom and then Alicia Britt Cole in a book called 40 Days of Decrease quoted her on this, where she said she equated getting praise from people as like people handing her a flower. And she said, it's not a matter of deflecting, it's a matter of redirecting. So when people compliment me, when people encourage me, when people praise me, I'm gonna receive that flower and say, thank you. Like, use that to let it build your confidence in who God made you to be. Use it to encourage you and build you up. And then she said, and at the end of the day, I take the bouquet and I give it to God. It's not mine. I'm grateful for it. But God, at the end of the day, it's yours. And I love that picture, because when people bring praise or encouragement or compliments, it's false humility to say, oh, no, like save your encouragement. Let that build you. They're trying to build you. Encouragement is a spiritual gift. Let them use it and receive it like a flower. Then at the end of the day, on your car ride home, hey, God, thank you, by the way. Like, I remember getting a really nice compliment this past weekend. And on the drive home going, God, I love my job, and I wouldn't be doing this if you didn't make me to do this. So thank you. This is gonna build me up and boost my confidence, and this is yours. Give your praise to God, because, one more time, if you live, do we have it? If you live by their praise, you will die by their criticism. So don't live by their praise. Give the praise to God. Yep.
All right. Hey, thank you for joining us for session 6 of Brainstorm, How to Have a Sound Mind. We're almost there. We've got 2 sessions left, so join us back here for session 7, Doug's favorite topic, the dopamine drip. We'll see you then.